Good evening and welcome to the February 6th, 2020 school committee meeting. Daryl, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a consent agenda from the January 23rd, 2020 meeting. Do you have any discussion on the minutes or oath of bills and payroll? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. This is the first part of the meeting where we allowed interested citizens to ask questions or bring any concerns. Would anybody in the audience like to voice their concern?
Or accolades.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Recognition. So we don't have our student representative here, but Dr. Clencher, did you want to give an update?
Sure, I'll do mine, and I can backtrack a bit. Principals can help fill in as well. Mrs. Harvey, did you give them too much homework, or?
No.
They never miss a meeting.
No. I think it's play rehearsal.
Oh, that could be the reason why. Well, as all of you know, each of our 4 schools is a kindness school. We're a kindness school district. Last week, we spent the entire week emphasizing the importance of kindness. All of our schools had a number of activities planned, and as a superintendent, I was very impressed with how meaningful those activities were. It's one thing to focus on that for a week, but it's my hope that each of our schools will perpetuate kindness every day at the school level, the community level, and beyond. And we've had some preliminary discussions about that. If we all take the time to show an act of kindness or give an act of kindness, it does make a difference in a person's day. And through time, it will have a pronounced effect on how people treat each other beyond our community and within our community and at our schools. So I'm very proud of the organizers of this event. Tracy Turner and Jennifer Futo spent endless hours making this happen. They're 2 high school teachers, but they reached out to our other 3 schools and helped them make sure that they were ready for the kickoff, and also helped them plan the various activities. So special thanks to both of them for a job well done. Shaker Lane Elementary School, the Imagitorium, LELWD always comes to the plate, so to speak, and our STEM science specialist requested a laser cutter for the Imagitorium. It's kind of hard to believe that students in grades pre-K to 2 have a laser cutter in the Imagitorium, but with Heidi's guidance, I'm very comfortable with that machine being in there, and don't have any concerns. But we're really excited about what they're going to do in there in terms of creating, and we'll make sure that they bring some of their creations here to share with you. To give you an idea, they're really not that cheap. Laser cutters are $6,500, and the LEF, which also is a great organization that supports us throughout the year, donated $1,600 to the laser cutter, and LELWD donated $4,500. So special thanks to both those organizations.
Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we do it as a matter of routine, and I've just lost the bubble on it. Do we send a thank you note also to these organizations for their donations?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, those organizations have been steadfast for many, many years, and a lot of people are pounding the pavement, so to speak, with fundraisers and making sure that they have some money to help support all the special things that we do during the year. I've said many times that our schools would look very, very different without these organizations helping us out. They do a tremendous job. Other news, winter sports is certainly well on the way. Our indoor track that appears to me to be outdoor sometimes is doing really well. I give those our students a lot of credit for running outside when it's really not that warm, but they seem to be out there quite a bit, and we're not talking 10 or 15 students. We're talking 70 students or 80 students. So they're doing really well again this year, as you've seen by the tweets and the newspaper articles. Our basketball teams are doing well this year as well, and I hear through the grapevine that they're going to be attending the Clark tournament. Is that right?
The boys are, yeah.
The boys are going to attend?
Both the boys and girls should qualify for the MIAA postseason tournament.
That's great. That's good news. With that, I'm going to invite the principals of each school to talk a little bit about the Kindness Week and some planning for beyond. And if I missed anything, feel free to tell us some special things that are happening in your school during the last 2 weeks. Dr. Harrington, you're closest to the mic.
I'll kick it off. Thank you very much, Dr. Clenchey. Yes, we're very excited about the this past week. There were lots of positive vibes and, school spirit throughout the building with the Great Kindness Challenge. I also want to echo your thanks and gratitude to two amazing faculty members, Mrs. Jennifer Feudo and Dr. Tracy Turner, for their efforts in bringing this to Littleton and having us recognized all of our schools as, for kindness and, being part of the kindness campaign. I also want to just add that students this past Saturday had a wonderful time at our winter semi-formal. This is something we started about 11 years ago. I felt that there was something that we needed to do in the winter to get the kids out for a night of dancing and just some fun in January during the blah. Sometimes it can be the winter blahs, and it syncs up nicely with the end of midterms and the start of the second semester. And students had a wonderful time at Devon's Common this past Saturday. Just some highlights from the Great Kindness Challenge at the high school this past week. I want to thank the community members and the staff who participated in greeting the students on Monday with a kindness tunnel of sorts. It was more of a high-five greeting, similar to what the police department has done the past few years. And students were welcomed at different entrances in a really positive way. I think many of them were caught off guard, like, what is going on? What's wrong with these people? We're so upbeat on a Monday morning. It was just really nice, and lots of town officials were there too, and I'm grateful to that. We also had a door decoration contest on Monday morning. Both Millie McGovern, who many people in the community know as our crossing guard, and Nancy Morrison, who's done incredible work over the years, both with the Boosters Association as well as with just tallying all the hours. She's been doing this since the mid-'90s, I believe, for the high school, tallying the hours for community service. Both of them participated as judges of the contest, and we recognized these students at a breakfast this past Monday. It was a full breakfast put on by our cafeteria staff, so thanks to them. We were able to recognize all the 4 advisories, 1 from each grade, for being winners of the door decoration contest. Students from the NHS in the weeks and days building up to the Kindness Challenge painted kindness quotes around the school. That, I think, is sort of a legacy piece that will remain. We want to build upon this week. We don't want to just look at it as a spirit week, similar to what we do in March. We want to look at it as something that we can really build on and promote. The other thing I want to highlight is over 400 kindness notes were written by students in English class on Wednesday. And that was a great opportunity for students to express gratitude and show appreciation, but the English department made that possible. There were customized notes available for students to send out to people, not just within the school. Some of them were thanking teachers, custodians, cafeteria staff, secretaries, even administrators. But there were thanks also given, kindness notes given to in recognition of community members by the students. So I'm very happy about that. 6 students also served as kindness ambassadors, helping with activities throughout the week. And students and staff, I know there were more than this, but they documented over 500 acts of kindness, which are on display with a kindness chain in the front lobby of the building. As you come in, you can't miss it. It's in blue and gold, this chain, and it has all kinds of, different testimonies to acts of kindness. So that's about it for us. We look to build upon this week and see how we can use it to promote further what is already a really positive school culture, but really promote it even further. So thank you very much.
At the Russell Street School, I was saying in the admin council meeting the other day, the age group at Russell Street is just ripe for this kind of activity. So our kids really enjoyed the entire week. The first week of this activity, the first time we've done this, we were kind of, as a staff, figuring out what directions we wanted to go in. So we did similar activities to the high school at Russell Street. We had we started each day with a kindness quote, and then there was a kindness challenge for each day. So for example, Monday was try to give 5 compliments today. And then there was some activities spread out throughout the week. So I organized on Monday that students made kindness jars. So they wrote messages for their bus drivers. And so each one of the bus drivers got a jar with all little notes in them, and then a little bag of treats on Monday. And the students were delighted to do that. On Tuesday, the students did a similar activity with the kindness notes for different members of the staff within our building. So the nurse, their special teachers, the secretaries, and there was a coffee station set up on Tuesday, which was really great. Wednesday, our kindness challenge was to be kind to the environment, so the students focused on recycling. And then our third grade team decided that as part of Kindness Week, they would host a luncheon for the entire staff on Wednesday afternoon, so that was wonderful. And on Wednesday, the students created a positive message board for the cafeteria staff. So when they came in on Thursday, there was a big poster with all messages for the cafeteria workers when they came in on Thursday. On Thursday, our kindness challenge was to show appreciation to 5 staff members, and students were going around the building with cards and little things that they made. So that was really sweet to see, for the guidance counselor or the nurse. And then we had High Five Friday within our building on Friday. On Friday, I tweeted out that this kindness cart appeared at the door in the office, and it was fourth graders that had a cart full of snacks, and they had written individual messages, and they had a whole schedule of where they went to every single class, and at least you had to take a message if you didn't want a treat, but the treats were delightful, and I tweeted out that the treats were sweet, and so were the kids. They were just delighted to be able to do that. So we're really within classrooms. When I visited classrooms, there were activities going on in every single room. Some small activities, some larger activities, but it really was a nice week across the board. We have decided when we did our mindfulness day, there was one complete day where we did mindfulness activities, and Tuesdays are our mindfulness days to continue that day throughout the year. So Thursdays are going to be our kindness days to continue throughout the year. So every Thursday we'll do something having to do with kindness in our building, and we're already talking about different types of activities that we could do next year for the Kindness Challenge Week.
For the middle school, we did many of the same things that John and Cheryl talked about. We had our welcoming arch, myself, Dr. Clinchy showed up. We had all kinds of people, teachers, parents, and it was great because the students were coming off the bus at 7 a.m. to see 15 people standing there clapping and screaming and cheering. I think caught a lot of them by surprise, and it was great to see the look of startled surprise on sleepy faces. We had decorated the school. Our assistant principal, Beth Morgan, put up challenges all over the building for kids to follow. I don't know how familiar you are with middle schoolers, but sometimes apathy can reign, and so getting kids to say things nice to other students or their teachers can be a challenge, and they really rose to it. A lot of good feedback from teachers about how kids took the time to say thank you and to say something meaningful. One of the things that we did, for example, in the 6th grade, was to take an opportunity to talk about what kindness looks like. rather than just throwing it out there, we broke the entire grade up into small groups of 10, and a staff member facilitated a conversation with each of those groups, just to sort of get to the heart of the matter. What does it look like to be kind to each other? You know, at this level, what does it take to really be kind? Just not doing something isn't the same as doing something, and really talk about being active in that. We had dress-up days and challenges and activities, but I want to take this moment to really thank the middle school PTA. We are really lucky. Our PTA is awesome, and they put together a wagon and went around by complete surprise to every classroom in the building with chocolate, Kleenex, bundles of pencils, Clorox wipes, Kleenex, and it was great to see teachers completely caught off guard and getting some of the supplies they so desperately need. Myself and Beth Morgan followed up the next day doing something similar with snacks and drinks, and the whole point of it was to piggyback them together so that students can see that adults treating each other with kindness is just as important as them treating each other with kindness. And we really wanted to take the time to model that we can have those moments between ourselves as well, and for kids to see that. So it was a very successful week. We spent time in our team meetings this week really talking about what worked, what we want to build on next year, and the direction that we want to take this. So it's not just a week-long event, but something that becomes infused into what we do more often in the middle school. Thank you.
And one thing that we also need to mention is we had a wonderful district-wide music concert this week. Our program numbers certainly depict vividly how much that program has grown over time. In fact, Dr. Herring and I were talking to each other and saying, I don't know if this venue's big enough anymore. There's so many participants. And so a special thanks to all the musicians and music teachers for making this happen. Also special thanks to our administrative team. We were all out and supervising hundreds of kids while they were waiting to play, and it was a lot of fun getting to know them a little better and also watching them perform. And I think what we need to do, though, is look at that cafeteria and find a bigger screen and a better sound system so that it's a little more real for them when their peers are playing in the auditorium. But it was a great evening. Yes?
May I take 1 minute to talk about an upcoming event?
Sure.
Thanks. They will not forgive me if I don't do it since they did all this preparation. In the fall, our Empowering Families team had a literacy night that you might remember me talking about, and they were all excited at literacy night to talk about the STEM night that they were going to have in the spring. So they're ready. The Empowering Families team at Russell Street is excited to announce the first ever Family STEM Design Challenge Night on Tuesday, March 31st from 6 to 8:30. Teams made up of at least one Russell Street student and one adult will have the opportunity to work together to problem solve, create, and collaborate by using cardboard, tape, and their imaginations. Clues about the mission will be given out throughout the weeks leading up to the event, but the final reveal will occur on the evening of March 31st. We would like to extend an invitation to all who would like to observe this wonderful event, and we are sure it will be very well attended and memorable. So I have a flyer. I'll leave them here, so if anyone wants to come, you're certainly all welcome. We hope to see you there, and I'll be happy to report out when it's done. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Presentations, we have History and Social Studies curriculum alignment.
Yes, you do.
Thank you for the invitation to do this.
The other way.
Okay. So, as you know, Chapter 296 was signed into law by Governor Baker in 2018, and this basically says that we need to add civics engagement into our curriculum. So, the timeline is that we should be piloting, or at least implementing, our projects in this academic year, and fully implemented by next year. And we are working towards that. So in the 8th grade, and I'm not going to read this for you because you can read this, but this is really building on students learning how to do research, how to figure out how the government works through legislation and court decisions, and how you actually exercise your civic responsibilities. So, we have an 8th grade teacher this year by the name of Connor O'Sullivan, and he has integrated 8th grade civics this year, doing very well. And he has plans for the civics project to be done this May. And I'm going to just go through the PowerPoint, and then I'm going to give you some updates, because we've been going to DESI meetings, and we had one yesterday. So. 9 through 12, at the high school level, this is from Principle 3 in the frameworks. At the high school level, where students should take at least 4 full-year courses in United States and world history, and the standards require interpretation and synthesis of complex ideas about individuals, groups, events, and institutions. Now, that 4 full years courses is in quotations, because after we went through this at the first DESI meeting I went to, I emailed the woman who was running this from the Department of Ed, and I said, does that mean that the Department of Ed is now going to 4 full years required as opposed to the 3? And she said, not yet. I have that in writing, not yet. So this is what they would like us to be doing. And we are left, and every single teacher there is going, and how do you expect us to do this? Well, maybe you can figure that out yourself. Okay, so this is our plan, and this is what we have been working on this fall, and we are going to be putting together in a hard form this spring. So world history in the 9th grade has thus far been World History 1. Nope, sorry, World History 2. World History 1 was in 8th grade. It no longer is, because it's civics. Well, how do you make that jump? We are asking the 7th grade teacher to go a little bit further with ancient history, and the middle school and the 9th grade teacher to go back a little further, and then only go up through the 19th century imperialism. You really must have Enlightenment ideas to understand what's going on with the Constitution and the formation of our country. So, unfortunately, that doesn't happen before civics, but they get it the next year from me. Okay. So US 1 history will now, instead of starting in 1491, which it does, and goes to 1900, it now will go from 1763 to 1920. We will revisit the Revolution from the 8th grade, and then start with the early Republic, Civil War, antebellum, all that, everything up through World War I. And I'm attempting to do that from 1491 up through World War I this year to make this, to see how possible this is. We're on track. The issue here is that, what do you do about the Pilgrims? They are covered at some earlier
Isn't that what the
age.
Native Americans asked too?
So we're not actually, according to the frameworks, to go back to, for instance, start talking about the beginning of slavery. That's not going to be covered the way it should be in the elementary schools. So we're going to have to figure out how to make that happen. And then in the 11th grade, we have U.S. History 2, which would also be AP US. Now that will cover, for U.S. History, it would cover 1920 to the current day, so that they have more of an opportunity to talk about more current things that are going on 20th century into the 21st, because history does march on. So the civics projects we have decided to put into the US 2 after looking at a lot of different options. We decided to put it into US 2 in the junior year. This is because there will now be 2 years that you would have had Constitution and understanding about U.S. government, et cetera. Okay? And it would not then just follow immediately from 8th grade. One of the questions that was asked yesterday was, well, what if somebody does a project in the 8th grade and then in the 11th grade they do the same one? Well, if it's on a Google Drive, you'll know, first of all. And second of all, they should be building on that. They should be learning more, and there's nothing wrong with that if they're given more parameters and something else to do. So we're not worried about that. And they're really going to be looking at this with much more independence, more depth, more complexity, that sort of thing. So the rationale, as I said, to put it in US2 is we have 2 years of government. We are building on the project from the 8th grade. The specific focuses on modern US, but looking at it from a historical standpoint. And most districts are planning to go in this direction. The civics, and this is also from the frameworks, while civics projects should align to the 2018 History and Social Science Framework, projects can be interdisciplinary and facilitated across content areas. I can see where that would happen, but it falls on the shoulders of the social sciences to make sure it happens. So at least in our piloting year, we're going to do this in US2 and figure out what is working and what isn't working. And happily work with science teachers, math teachers, English teachers, if this is what we're going to be doing. Our 12th grade electives. This includes one new one, and this is the global studies, and this would essentially be World History 2. It's 20th century, current day, global focus, current events, and that is a way for us to be talking about the world that's not just US, right? Because that's terribly important. Then Facing History and Ourselves, which I teach, used to be a semester course, it is now a full year course. I could use more. Summer school, anybody? And we cover the 20th and 21st century genocides, the racism, human rights, current events. We also have AP Psych and we have AP Art History. Now, AP Art History can be taken at an earlier age. You can take this as early as a sophomore. We also then have semester courses. We have economics, which includes financial literacy, and we are having a financial literacy fair. Yes, April 15th, tax day. Thought that was appropriate. Sociology, psychology, American government, which right now is being called civics, but it won't be, and US2, or US Film Goes to War. And that covers how the movie industry has covered the US at war. So, our plan, we have 4 PDs that our teacher led, that we are going to be reconfiguring the current classes to meet the curriculum and create the templates for the civics projects for next academic year. All right, so that's that. Let me give you an update on what we learned yesterday. One of the questions that has come up since I started going to these DESE meetings, and they're held in 2 different parts of the state, east and west, is how are these going to be assessed? If these are going to be a graduation requirement, which is what the state says they will be, what are you looking for? And the state can't tell us. And it came out yesterday in the meeting that we had, because we were specifically looking at assessment, that it may be more the process than the product. You might be able to get a local law passed. You might be able to get something done in your school. Bravo. But not every student is going to have that opportunity. And they shouldn't be penalized if they don't get a law passed, right? So I'm thinking back to when we used to have senior project. And this is something, when I first started teaching in Littleton, we had this. And we were looking at it as a graduation requirement. And it became very clear after a couple of years, this wasn't going to be possible because the kids had not had enough independent work to know how to do this independently. Now, some of them were brilliant. Some of them came across really well. But it was the process. It was the who you reach out to, how you reach out to them. What are you doing to make this happen so that you could do this? I remember that one of the guys in senior project did figured out how to run all the school buses on ethanol or something, and we didn't do it, but it would work. You know, I mean, everything down to the letter, and they had mentors, and so that's kind of how I'm seeing this in terms of our assessment. Lots of writing, lots of reflection. So that's what we're looking at. Now, in terms of the 8th grade, Connor and I have been working together on this, and I told him that I would continue to work with him on this, obviously, and we will see how it works. The kids have come up with an idea, and it has to be student-generated, and they are concerned about vaping in our community and our schools. So they are going to be researching the effect of vaping on Littleton community. I'm reading this because he sent this to me, as well as the nation as a whole. The students will develop strategies for combating the issue and will work towards presenting their findings to our school as well as our community. And they are encouraged to collaborate with a partner throughout the project. So this goes sort of online after February break. And they are going to be working in pairs, researching the health risks of vaping in the schools and in the communities. They're going to be looking at different age groups. They are going to be working with partners. They're going to be using curated research, I guess that's what I want to say, so that they're not just sort of wildly going off and learning how to do this. This is something else that came up yesterday. A big piece of what the state really wants us to do, and frankly, we're doing this. We had this conversation that we were doing this already in our classes, is media literacy. Learning how to learn, what is legit and what is not, and how do you figure that out? Years ago, again, we had our town librarian come in. We had a grant, I think it was LEF. Thank you, LEF. That brought her in to teach my freshmen how to actually look at websites critically. So that's something we would like to bring back again, to do that. I don't know that we have the bandwidth to create a whole elective on it, so we need to make sure we're getting it done in our classes. So they are going to be doing that. They're going to be using community issues research. They're going to be making notes about community interviews, their observations of their own lived experience, things they get from local media. They will be contacting local politicians. Get ready. And to get information and your politicians' viewpoints. So how this is going to look in May, we're still working on that. Could be like a science fair, right? With that sort of a presentation, with having spoken with, our local politicians, our state reps, very possible. Anyway, this is being given some serious thought, and the woman at the state level, Mary Lou Sutter, the Director of Health and Human Services, I know that Connor has been in touch with her about this project. So I'm really excited, and I think it's going to be fine. I will know more in May as to how our projects are going to look. We already do a great deal of research in all of the classes at the high school level in social sciences, because they do research papers. They have to, and they have to learn how to do this. So, and I'm just going to give a little plug for my kids. Every year after we have studied our Constitution unit, I ask them to think about what the 5 biggest things are that are facing our country today. And in past years, I've had them learn how to make an amendment to the Constitution. Well, that's been useful and cool, but it didn't really go anywhere. So this year, they did the same research and put together very well-crafted letters, I might say, and sent them off to their senators in Washington. We don't have responses yet, but I anticipate we will get them. So they're already doing that. Thank you. Questions?
Questions, Jen?
No, this sounds exciting, and will you be coming back in May to talk to us, or?
I suspect I'll have to.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful if you
Yeah.
could.
Yes. I'll work it into my schedule, yeah. Yeah. Yeah? Okay.
I thought it was very cool, what's going on with US 2, shifting it up to the start in 1920, so we can talk more about current events, so,
Yep,
very good.
yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, I enjoyed the focus on the civics aspect, and then I was going to ask about the figuring out which timelines of history and what, do you pull threads through history that will eventually feed what you're trying to emphasize for the 19th and 20th century aspects? Because there's like big blocks of history that are just blocked.
Yes.
I don't know anybody that's had a good experience in terms of like those big blocks of time.
You have to be a geek like me, I think.
But in terms of like, obviously you have your own passion for some very specific topics that that I would assume that you would be trying to pull through the threads there, because I think they feed, like if you're going to emphasize constitutional pieces there, there are some very important blocks from old history that would feed that. But are you choosing them, or are you just covering, how do you choose what you cover? And particularly that early 9th grade where it's a big block of time.
It's huge.
In history.
And that is what we're hoping to figure out. I know that what the 2 teachers who teach world history for the freshmen right now had done some work in the previous years about how to make sure that their classes were aligned and that they were not necessarily covering everything exactly the same, but that we were making sure that our final exams were at least 75% the same. We've done that for the whole time that I've been teaching there, so that if you share a class, those kids are getting the same material. That's what we're going to be spending a lot of afternoons doing, trying to figure out exactly how to do this. The thread that I use in US 1 is slavery, and then when I teach US 2, it's immigration. It's there throughout the entire thing. So we'll figure it out. And I'll get back to you.
You always do.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. When we see these kinds of things coming down from the state or the federal level, it seems like we get out in front, Littleton, pretty quick. And I'm always confident, and we were always confident as a school committee, that you guys are going to take the opportunity to make this work to the benefit of the students in Littleton.
Yeah.
If the constraints on the DSE in this particular example, you guys will work around them. My hope is that you don't have to retool because they change in midstream, and work that you guys did that's valuable and worthwhile doesn't necessarily fit their parameters to the point where you'd have to say, oh, unfortunately, we're going to have to give up some of this in order to retool it back to what they're expecting.
Their parameters are pretty loose at the moment.
Well, that's good.
Because they don't really know what they're doing.
Right, but I'm afraid that, when they get,
But-
right, they're telling you to run ahead while they sit back and say, well, yeah, we just want you to run ahead and we'll give you the details later after
Well,
the fact.
no, I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things that I neglected to tell you is that we are out in front. At the end of yesterday's session, the woman who was running it, who's been running all the ones that I've been going to, said, so how many of you were piloting this year? And maybe a third of the people raised their hand, and we were one of them.
Right,
So we are out in front.
right,
Other school districts near us, nothing.
right.
So are we perhaps going to have to make some changes? Yes, we're building flexibility into this because we have to.
Yeah, good.
We have to.
Yeah. And I'm not worried that if you do have to give something up, that it wouldn't have been worthwhile to have been teaching it while you had the opportunity to teach it.
Right.
Daryl asked a question about the threads, and the threads you cited were great. And there is no wrong answer necessarily to that, as long as you have an idea of how you want to execute on it.
That's
I think
right.
we're going to be fine, and the kids are going to benefit. And I just hope that, again, that we're not constrained by DSE to, so that you guys can't do as good a work as we know given you your free reign, you would do.
Right.
So we'll have to,
Well-
and that's kind of the update I'm looking for too, when you come
Yeah.
back, is
Yeah.
how are we doing, and are we feeling like we're getting as much out of this as we could ever have hoped for, and we're not being constrained in any significant manner by the parameters being put down on.
Well, here's the other neat thing, is that at the end of this conference yesterday, she said, any of you who were piloting in May, if you want to come back and present, and Connor looked at me and went, yeah. So we may be doing that and then getting feedback from everybody there, which will be terribly valuable. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Or
Thank
you may find them taking notes because
Yeah,
they're trying to catch
exactly.
up.
Right, yeah.
Copyright.
Exactly right. Are you kidding? That's
It
fabulous.
seems like a benefit, right? And they base their
Plagiarism,
around
the
us.
highest form of flattery.
Awesome, thank you.
Mrs. Hart.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have a presentation on the Student Opportunity Act.
maintain the theme of Massachusetts passed laws this evening with the Student Opportunity Act. So in tonight's presentation on the Student Opportunity Act, we're going to answer three major questions. What is this act? What does it mean for us here in Littleton Public Schools? And what are the next steps for us to move forward? So starting with what actually is the Student Opportunity Act. This act was passed into law on November 26, 2019 by Governor Charlie Baker. Officially, it is titled an act relative to educational opportunity for students, commonly known as the Student Opportunity Act, and even also known as the SOA in a very brief manner. And so what this act actually is an investment in schools. And so it provides a significant infusion of new funds, meant a lot of that funds going into Chapter 70. And so every district will receive at least some increase in Chapter 70 funds for next year. The main intent of this act is to close persistent achievement gaps. And so in increasing the funding, that allows districts access to some more resources to be able to close those persistent gaps that exist. And so we need to be able to identify a gap and outline our plan to close that gap, achievement or opportunity gap, in a 3-year plan. And so this plan needs to be consistent with district targets. It needs to be developed by the superintendent and is to consider input and recommendations from many stakeholders, including parents, educators, and others from the community. The plan also needs to be approved by the school committee before it's submitted to DESE on April 1st. So you can see we have a pretty tight deadline with regards to the creation of this plan. And so the main thing, again, that we have to go back to is that this plan is going to need to address the disparities in achievement among student groups. So there are 4 major elements in the SOA, and those 4 are actually the 4 statutory requirements that can be found within the law. And so you see those 4 here on this slide. Number 1 is there in the box in the center of the screen. And this is the fact that we need to identify a subgroup based in data. And we need to be able to implement an evidence-based practice to help this subgroup with either opportunity or achievement. And so there are 9 program categories that are listed there that DESE or I should actually say that are in the law and that DESE emphasizes. In addition to those 9 program categories, DESE has also come out with a list of 17 recommended programs to use or examples of high quality programs that we can use to implement for this plan. The second, which is below the box, is the fact that we need to have parent and community engagement. And so how are we going to meaningfully engage our stakeholders? We need to consider input from parents and community stakeholders and consider ways to support opportunities to increase the parent engagement throughout the duration of the 3-year plan. So not only do we have to seek stakeholder engagement in the creation of the plan, but also ideally also increasing that parent engagement over the course of the plan, specifically of the subgroup of students that we are looking to increase either their opportunity or their achievement. The third piece of this 4-piece puzzle is the resource allocation plan found on the left here. And so this is where the budget comes in and how we have to explain the use of the funds that are being designated to our district for this plan. And we have to specify exactly how these funds will be allocated to decrease the disparities that we have identified. The fourth and final piece is a major part of this puzzle is with regards to the outcome metrics. And so we have to be able to monitor the program in order to show that it is helping the students that we have identified where there is this disparity exist. And so those are the 4 pieces of the puzzle that come together to be the 4 major commitments, is what they're called in the plan, and because they're the 4 statutory requirements. And so what does this mean for us here in Littleton Public Schools? we are going to receive an increase in funds, in Chapter 70 funds. However, what's important to note is that 85% of the new Chapter 70 money is going to about only 35 districts, 35 to 37 districts. We are not one of those 35 to 37 districts that's getting a good chunk of the change. However, since we are getting some funds, we do have to create a plan that shows that we are helping a subgroup that has been identified. And so we do have to create a 3-year plan. We will follow or have the guidance by DESE. That is guidance. We can follow what they have suggested, but we can also go outside of that if we find that our district doesn't fit into those specific 9 categories. We can go outside of that, but we then have to prove to DESE why it is an area in which we need to go that way, and the commissioner has to approve that. And so a lot of the money, we're getting a small chunk of change, which we are very happy to receive, but majority of the money will be going to larger urban districts where the number of low-income students is higher, and the number of students with the highest amount of need is at those districts, so they'll be receiving more money. And so next steps for us in this process is to develop the plan and propose the 3-year plan with input from local stakeholders. And so we can do that through school council meetings, also through surveys, so keep an eye out for how that will be done within the next month or so. We then will, after the plan has been developed with this input, acquire school committee approval of the said plan and submit that plan to DESE by April 1st of this year. At that point, it's the waiting game until about May or June to see if our plan is accepted and whether or not it needs any amendments. And then from there, it'll be again waiting until the fall until we can see what our targets would be for the metrics. And so those are our next steps with regards to the Student Opportunity Act. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before your question is, at the budget meeting I was at on Saturday, the question that was asked was, are there any unfunded mandates that have come down from the state recently? And I was like, oh no, we're fine. So this is, I wouldn't call it an unfunded mandate per se, but it is a significant amount of work. There will be some benefit. I'm curious as to what the administration feels, is the ratio of the benefit to the effort level required to receive it.
Well, there are a couple of things here. I'm really glad you asked that question. I've asked Steve to phone the finance department at DESE tomorrow and get further clarification. But from our rough calculations, we would receive a little over $40,000, but which is unclear to us is that our Chapter 70 is showing an increase of $48,000. So if that in fact is embedded in that $48,000, we were getting Chapter 70 increases anywhere between $18,000 and $25,000 a year. So you have to take those numbers into consideration. So
Yep.
Conservatively, I'm going to say that we're maybe getting $25,000 realistically. And all of the subgroups that every district has, you can well imagine that we wouldn't make a difference if we tried to spread that money out evenly. So we need to identify where our highest needs are and then focus on perhaps one subgroup or one program and to make sure that what we're going to do is truly going to make the difference.
And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There are no subgroups that are going to be identified that we're not already servicing.
Right.
The question is, can we increase the service level by virtue of receiving this extra funding?
Exactly.
So I think that's important for everybody to remember.
And
That is a good clarification. And I mean, there are many different areas that we can look at. Interestingly enough, full day K was on there as one avenue. Greater access to pre-K, things like that. Could be an opportunity for us to take a look at our ESL population. And you're right, Chairman Fontanella. We're taking care of all of our subgroups, but this gives us an opportunity to perhaps do something a little different than we are doing. And I think it's important to also say that we would have done it anyway.
Right.
Because we're always looking for ways to offer better services to our students.
We might have chosen to do outside of this particular framework.
Exactly.
But this framework should be sufficient to the purpose, one would hope.
Well, we'll
Maybe a
make-
little
we'll
bit
make
more-
sure it is.
Right, well, maybe a little more, bit more bureaucratic than we would have otherwise have chosen, because they're required to make sure that their model fits all the districts that are gonna participate in this program. You know, and one size fits all sometimes means that it doesn't really fit anybody, you know, perfectly. So there may be some, you know, extra work that needs to be done that we wouldn't have otherwise chosen to do that isn't directly impactful to the student population that we're looking to service, but meets the bureaucratic reporting requirements of the state, because they obviously they have a requirement to do it that way, because they're gonna have to report back to the governor and the legislature, you know, how was the money spent, what was the cost benefit? You know, it's even, especially those 35 to 37 districts, they're gonna wanna know that, and that was really one of the reasons why it took so long for this to happen, was the accountability factor. Nobody was arguing that, you know, doing something wasn't worthwhile. The question was what was the right thing to do, and how can we measure the benefit and make sure that, you know, we're using the resources we have as efficiently as possible and having as broad an impact as possible, so.
Another area we could look at is college and career readiness as well. So I mean, there's certainly things that are near and dear to what our strategic plan has already spelled out in terms of direction. It's just a matter of which one are we going to focus on at this point in time.
Jen, any other comments or questions? Just over to you.
Yeah, and this is not mean to shoot the messenger, but I think I'm piggybacking on some of the conversation here, is like, as I look at the evidence-based practices, why wouldn't we be doing these? You know, and I think we actually have fairly, not necessarily aggressive, but we have pretty solid programs in almost all of these areas as it is here. So when we start having what bothers me here is identifying a specific subgroup here, and quite frankly, maybe I'd like to know, do we have disadvantaged subgroups, and what are they? Maybe we need a separate report on that, just so that we're tracking that a little bit more carefully, but I don't get the impression that we have great disparity in our subgroups at this point.
No, we don't. I mean, there are many ways you can organize students in terms of subgroups. I mean, a typical example would be taking a look at our population and focusing in on the number of days students are absent, and then correlating that to their achievement. I mean, that may be something that we perhaps would look at a little more closely. We had trained their administrators 2 months ago in a new analytical tool that the state has out, and it allows us to create any subgroup we would like and take a look at that data over time. So, I mean, this really piggybacks with what the state's trying to do in terms of giving us meaningful data to look at that we can manipulate and organize it in a fashion that makes sense for our district. So, I mean, there's some benefit in this. I do find it to, in my opinion, to be a little too regulatory. Some districts may need that. That's why they have tiered districts, and they've numbered them. But they take that into account when they were creating the regulations.
And then I had been following some of the budget pieces there. It looked like the Chapter 70 realignment and the funding from the governor and what they were talking about was, I think we were going to probably get at most the minimum, which was $30 a student, which is about $48K, of which now it also includes this bonus money that I don't think is not separately identified, right? Our Chapter 70 has already been projected, and it's the minimum increase that every district will get there for it. So
That's what I'm going to try to verify tomorrow.
Right.
well, when you said 48K and I did 30 times 1,600, I came up with 48K.
That's exactly what it is.
Pretty quick
Right.
there.
And the
So-
Chapter 70 money identified in the governor's budget was $48,330.
Yeah, which is the
whatever that number
minimum
is. Right.
that every district is guaranteed for it, which I think was set before any of the, now whether some of it's set aside for this or not is that's why I guess I want to make sure we don't set the false expectation that there's going to be an influx of money for this program, because I'm not sure that that's really the way.
No, there won't be, and I think I don't think I
That's
know.
my interpretation as well.
Yeah, no, and we've talked about it, I just want to, I'm just sort of making sure everybody understands, there's no additional influx of money coming for this.
What we're going to be doing is taking a look at some of the things that we're already doing and probably just focus on one in terms of the application we have to send in. And we're going to keep doing everything anyway, but you're right, it's, if there isn't any unknowns in terms of that 40,000, in terms of is there extra money coming to us, I mean, the bottom line is, we're doing this anyways. It's a matter of doing paperwork now and aligning it to their evidence-based tools that they would like us to use.
Yeah, and it would be nice to know if it costs us less than $48,000 in staff labor to create such a plan. But that's, anyway, I shouldn't bother saying any more on this. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Awesome, thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
All right, we're at the second meeting for input from interested citizens. None, and we're in the subcommittee reports, PNBC.
Look, we haven't met since the last meeting. Next week is the first meeting, and I just looked at the agenda. We'll be having youth baseball in to talk about their project. Then.
Budget subcommittee, so we did have the budget summit meeting here last Saturday. They changed it up a little bit. The only departments that presented their budget last Saturday was highway, police, fire, and the school department. The other departments were done offline from that meeting, and then the information that they got from those other departments was put into a big, thick book, along with the police, fire, highway, and schools. It was the presentation by me on behalf of the school department budget was very similar to that it has been in past years at this Saturday. You know, I presented it, we talked about it, there was talk about the operations budget, talk about the capital budget, and then just some general discussion about the state of the district and what's coming up, population, Shaker Lane renovation, very general but interesting. What then did happen that unfortunately I couldn't be a part of, I just didn't have that much time that day, was a working session between the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen as they talked about all the stuff that had been presented. And right now, the information that had been presented starting on Saturday, there was a $190,000 roughly deficit between what was being asked for and available revenues. So at that working session, I believe they started to talk about what are some ideas of closing that gap. I couldn't be a part of that, but I'm working on getting an update on, did they close it? Are they still thinking about what the options are relative to it? I would assume that they couldn't make a final decision because there were some questions about some of the things that we were asking for increased spending. So they're going to need to ask us, what our thoughts are on, do we need all of that, or how much can we, live without relative to some of the things that they might be thinking about not doing in the original budget request for other departments. So that process has to happen. Having said that, $190,000, looking at the asks for all the departments, I don't think it's going to be that hard to trim some of that out of there and get to a balanced budget prior to town meeting without anybody really suffering any significant pain. Really, the only pain they're going to suffer is they didn't get everything that they asked for. Nobody's going to be asked to do with less than they had started, the previous fiscal year with. So, that's good news. So as the budget subcommittee, we'll just reach out to the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen to talk about what they want to do next in terms of process.
So that 190K difference, so didn't they recommend that we move from capital almost $100,000 of stuff to operating budget? Is that 100 of that 190, or it's not to that granularity at this point?
Well, I mean, so the things that they asked both the school department and some of the other departments to move from capital into operations had been moved, and even after moving it, they still had the 190,000. So yeah, you could argue that, well, we could just move that back to capital, but then they would have to fund capital more than they are projecting that they want to fund it, or do without it. But you're right, like some of those things could be targeted. On the other hand, there was significant, relatively speaking, the town department wants to form their own HR department. They want to hire like a head of HR and a admin assistant. Now, and that's like $130,000 above the current budget. Now, having said that, there are retirements taking place that are going to offset some of that, but that's still pretty big. They're looking, the police department's looking for 2 new patrol officers. The fire department is looking for 1 new firefighter. You know, we're looking for part-time HR and accounts payable help. You know, so it's things like that. Now, you add all those things up, and the initial increase on the town side was 14% over FY20. It's a lot of money. You could get that down to, if you got that down to 12%, you're probably fine. And that's still significant, a significant increase. So I don't think it's going to be all that difficult. It's just a question of making the decisions and going through the process. So we'll work that process, and I assume that there'll be some joint meetings where we talk about it. We haven't set dates or anything along that long yet, but we should be. I think we'll be fine. But we'll work the process and see. So, all right. Policy subcommittee?
So policies for tonight, we have the second reading of the one modified policy and second reading for the bulk of the reviewed policies there. I was planning originally to have the first reading of another batch tonight with the goal of finishing those before the budget meeting there. But as I was prepping that package to email it to Dorothy, I get the email from MASC with about 20 revised policies in it, several of which are the ones I had just worked on, so those aren't going to make it. I'm going to meet with Kelly on Monday, and I'm hoping that the meeting before the budget meeting we'll have the first reading of it, and then we'll push the second reading until after the budget hearing, just so that we reserve the budget meeting for just the budget. That's the plan. We'll see if we can hit it there. So, and with that, you know, if I could have a motion supporting the second reading of the modified and reviewed policies, we can knock those off our books.
Okay. Let's do them as 2 separate motions.
Yeah, I have to make your screen bigger.
Well, I know, but
No.
What's the other one?
ADC was the modified policy, and the rest of them are the reviewed policies.
Okay. All right, I make a motion to approve the second reading of ADC as modified.
Seconded.
All right, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Let's see, it's listed.
Doesn't it?
You have to go through.
It isn't?
Yes.
Okay.
So there it goes.
Okay, I get it. Okay, I'll make a motion for the second reading of the reviewed policies as listed in the agenda.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Aye. None. Not for me.
Hearing none.
Hearing none.
All those in favor?
Just excited to vote yes on these.
All right, everybody else in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Better not say
None?
nay.
That was sensitive.
All right, any other business? I would like to ask for a very short executive session relative to contract, for the purpose of contract negotiations.
Make a motion to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations with no intent to return to open session.
All right, motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Jen?
Aye.
Darrell?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
I say aye as well. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, LCTV, and we'll see you after February break.